Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. So it's been a while since I've done a video. I'm going to try to get back into it. My desk is kind of half desk, half baby changing station. So hopefully try to get back into it now. Today we're going to be doing a video about Remix, just very, very basic, simple tutorial. I'm still learning it myself, so just trying to understand the building blocks of Remix and how it works. If you enjoy this kind of content, please consider subscribing and let's get right into it. So I'm not going to go into too much detail as to why I think anyone should use Remix. Definitely one for me, one I'm going to be using in the future. I'll leave a link to a blog post by Kent Dodds. He's got quite a good description of why you might use it. Ultimately, for me, when I'm picking a tool, it's just about basically does the tool make sense for me. From a technical point of view, 80-90% of the tools out there will do the job. It's just about which one makes sense for you, which one feels intuitive, which one provides the best developer experience for you. And yeah, so that's basically what I want to cover in this video. So we're going to do a very simple tutorial, the building blocks again. I'm still learning it myself. And if you ever want to dive deeper into any kind of specific area, let me know in the comments below and we can do that. So yeah, let's get started. So to get started with Remix, we're just going to do npx create remix and we're going to do this in a directory called Remix tutorial. It is worth knowing that Remix is a server-side rendered framework similar to Next.js as opposed to a client-side one, similar to Create React App. So the first thing it does is it gives you an option of, how are you going to deploy this or where are you going to deploy it. So they've got a few basically templates that are already pre-built that allow you to get started straight away. For now, I'm just going to start with the Remix app server. That's one, that's Remix's own server, and it's just probably the easiest one to get started. Yeah, I want TypeScript, and yeah, you can run npm install. So I'm going to give this a few seconds and then we'll get started. Cool. So now that that's done, I've opened it up in IntelliJ, and what we're going to do is we're very quickly going to have a look at the directory structure, and then we'll go into all basically the different components that make up a Remix app. So from the top level here, the only kind of specific file you might want to pay attention to is this Remix config. And this is a configuration of the application. Most web frameworks will have this, so this is kind of a familiar thing. We just configure things like the directories of the different build paths, etc., and then the server port. So we can basically leave it as is. The rest of the files here are pretty standard for kind of any React app. We then have a couple of directories that are important to look at, which is the app and the public directories. So the build only comes once you've of course built it. The public one is basically to provide any assets, but you'll note here we don't have our kind of index HTML page, and that's because the index HTML is going to be handled within the roots within the app, and we'll show that in a moment. But here by default they're just providing a favicon, but this is where any additional assets go, and basically the rest of your app is going to happen inside the app directory. So within the app directory we have an entry for the server, an entry for the client. Remember, this is a server-side rendered application. Then we have the root. ROUTE. So this is where the basically app starts, the main the main entry point, and then we have all your routes, which all go inside here, right? So actually, on the documentation, a good place to start is if you look at the navigation. These are the main things that you need to know about React. So we have the routes again on the directory. We're going to go over loading data, nested routes again. That's just within the directory / params, actions and data updates. And there's a couple of things here, styling and meta, that we can kind of quickly go over here. So let's have a quick look at entry, server, and client. But these are pretty standard. If you're just getting started out, probably just don't touch them. You can just see here what it's doing. It's just using React DOM server to render the React to a string. You've got full access to the headers, etc., which is quite powerful. Same with the status code. If you're used to client-side rendering, you know that you usually want to always return a 200, but then change things on the client. You've got full access. So that's all this does here. It returns a response with the HTML. And note that Remix has this kind of philosophy of bringing back web fundamentals, and you'll see this around Remix a lot. They use kind of the web fundamental APIs. Response is one of them here. So if you go into the documentation here, you'll notice this is not a Remix specific thing. This is a web fundamental thing. You can go into the MDN web docs, you can see the response, you can see the request. This is quite a big theme in Remix as well, which is just in case you're wondering where all these objects come from. So I don't want to go too much into the server. That's pretty standard. The client, again, pretty standard. We're hydrating. The thing to focus on here is we're hydrating onto the document. We're not hydrating into a div, with an ID of app, and that's because the entire, the template, all the HTML is going to come from from JSX, from React, and we'll see that in the root component here in a moment. Yeah, so let's start at the root component. So every file basically exports a default function, which is basically going to be the component that comes out of that file, right? So the root one is a bit special because it happens outside of the roots directory. This is basically the entry point, but the rest of them will happen inside the roots. And the way this works is basically using React router. And you can see inside here, if I just quickly show you, you can see this outlet, which is a React router thing, which basically means if the URL matches any other path, you can just render it in here. And the paths are going to be determined by the naming conventions of the files and the directory structure. So we'll look into that in a second. So here we export a default function app. So this is basically what's going to be rendered. And if we look at the document here, and this is what we mean by, you have access to the full templates. We're actually, rendering the HTML ourselves. We're rendering the head tag, the body, all the links. Everything is completely controlled here. So we don't need to, inject things at runtime using, React Element, different dependencies. It's all done within the application here, which is, it's actually quite powerful. There are a few other things going on here from Remix, and this is basically ways to collect all the additional meta tags and links from the child components, and we'll see those in a second. And that's it. I don't want to go too much details there. Cool. So let's have a look at basically a few things here. In Remix, there are basically a few functions that you can export, and these specific functions will be picked up by Remix, and this is basically how you control the behavior and the state of the application, right? So the default function, and these two here, is basically, this is what we want you to render from this file, and that's, in this case, the root. If it's an index inside the root, that means it's just, a slash. The default function is basically what we want you to render. If your file then has well, I guess let's go through them. If your file has a links function like this, you're basically returning a list of styles that you want to add, right? And each different root can add its own styles, and when that root is removed, the styles are also removed. And the styles are exposed like this. In this case, it's just an array. You have you can see here it's a style sheet, and we've got the styles URL, which is just an import from a CSS file. So that actually returns a URL. And then in terms of how does it actually come into the document, you can see down here, this links here is basically what goes in and fetches that. Similarly, if you define a meta function, I think there is one inside this index here. If you define a meta function, you're basically wanting to add meta tags when this root or when this file is loaded. So in this case, this is going to be loaded at localhost 3000, just a slash because it's an index. Therefore, the meta will be basically what you see here. So actually, I've actually got this running. So let me just rerun this just so you can show you. So you got the scripts. So I'm just going to run remix dev to run this, and we can actually have a look at these meta tags while we're doing this. So you can see here, we're at slash. You can see the remix starter, which is this here. And there's going to be a description there as well. So that's fine. So that's the links. We've looked at meta. So next up, basically we have loader, which you can see here. And this is basically a way to fetch data. And the most important thing to know about this loader function is it runs on the server, not on the client. So when your request comes in for a specific page, this loader function will get hit. It executes anything you want here. Maybe you want to do an API fetch, you want to access a database, and then whatever you return here will be accessible to to your component, right? So the way it's accessible is by using this use loader data. So we have a loader up here, and whatever we return, and remember this is getting executed on the server, basically will be accessible to your app through the use loader data function. So we can see data here. It's got the date, which comes from the new date, which is basically being rendered on the page, just like that. There's another one for actions, which we'll go into in a moment when we create another route. So they've not done that here by default. And then the final two at the bottom here are basically error boundaries. So what to do when your app, when something goes wrong. So either if I go into a page that doesn't exist, so this is going to return a 404. So you can kind of see that on the network tab. If I jump over to network here, hopefully you can see that. This is returning a 404. Let's just bring that up. There we go, 404. So that is going to get caught in this catch boundary, and then you can get access to the error details, and then you can basically return whatever you want. In this case, we're again returning the full document. We're updating the title, the page, and then if there is something that this is basically for anything that's an expected error. If there's unexpected errors, for example, an internal server error or something that is completely broken or or basically anything that comes out of this switch statement as well for the expected errors, it's going to run into this error boundary. And again, you just update the JSX there with whatever you want. You've got full access to the document, and you just display that. So another thing to note here is this is at the root level, but you can add one of these to any of your child or layouts or components. So in this case, if an error happens, the whole page is going to go, but you might only want the error happen to a specific component or a child root. So that's all. All of these can be exported in basically any root that you have. So one of the final things I want to do is let's add a root or a couple of roots, and let's just have a look at the actions, and we'll see one pretty cool thing about this. So to add a root, let's say we wanted to add something called create, right? That doesn't exist yet. So I'm just going to go over to roots, new file. I'm just going to do create.tsx, and all we need to do is basically export a function. So export default function create, and let's just return create here. There we go. So you can see straight away, let me just pop this all the way down. You can see that the create page now exists. And all we had to do was export a default function there. So in this create, so what if we wanted to do a mutation? What if we wanted to send, add a form, send something to the server? Well, let's do that here. In fact, let's do that in a child root. That might be a bit better. So if you wanted to create child roots, right? What you would do is you would add the outlet component. So outlet here, basically saying, let's just close this. Basically saying any child components of create / anything else, basically display it here. So right now we don't have anything, which is fine. But what we're going to do in order to get that to work, you're going to create a directory with the same name as the existing root. So a create directory. So this is the main create. It has outlet for its nested components, and all of those are going to live inside here. So within here, we're going to have an index.tsx. Index.tsx is basically just create /. Right, and this here is an example of the error boundary getting caught here, and it's got quite nice error messages as well. So it's telling you, hey, go add a component to this. So let's add a default component to this. Let's call this create index, and then we're just going to say index here, and hopefully that will see. So we'll see our create from the top level, and then we have the index from the one below. So instead of this h1 here, what we're going to do is we're just going to create a form here. Let's remove this guy. So we're going to do a form, and we're going to turn off autocomplete because that drives me crazy sometimes. And we'll just keep it at that for now. Let's just add input of type text. So do type text. So we're just going to add some text, and we'll give it a name of, let's just say we're adding a title for something. And then we might want to add a button to submit it, right? So let's do type submit, and let's call this one submit. There we go. Cool. So we have a form, right? This is a very simple HTML form, no JavaScript, nothing kind of fancy going on here. The default behavior of the web, when you have a form and you type in something and you hit enter, you can see at the top it refreshes the page, it redirects it, and it adds it to the URL. So there's something kind of magical going on there. The web, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but all you need to know is that it's basically redirecting to in this case, the same URL, but it's actually adding the data onto the URL as URL parameters. If I basically change this to method is equal to post, instead of adding it onto the URL like we saw there, it's just going to add it as a body. So if I do something here, it's not going to add it to the URL. But if you looked at the network tab, if you look at the body, and let's just do that for a moment, just to see that it's all working. So if I bring this out here, take this up, let's clear our existing logs. Let's do something, enter. You can see that there's create here, and this was a post, and you can see the body at the bottom, title is equal to something. Now we've done that, and you can see there's an error here, and that's because Remix is basically expecting you to handle that. It recognizes that, hey, there's an action that's happened, there's a post action that's happened in this create root, but we haven't handled it. So you can see did not provide an action root, and this is where the action function I was telling you about earlier on. So if we export a function called action, I think it's called action function, that should hopefully create, so now that error is gone. And basically what we get inside here, well, we get a few things. One of the things we get is the request, right? And that request is basically exactly what we just saw. So what we can do, usually what you do here is you return a redirect. So you may redirect, once you submit a form, you might want to redirect somewhere. You might redirect to the exact same page, or you redirect somewhere else. So in this case, let's just redirect to, well, actually, let's redirect to the title. So we can get this request is a known, again, we're talking, well, let's see if we can jump into here. We're talking the web fundamentals. So this is just a function here that returns a promise with a response. So here, this function just gets a request, also gets the parameters, etc. This request is just the web fundamentals request. So we know exactly what that's going to look like, and we can actually, we can await we know that we can await the request text. So we can do request.text, and we can actually wrap that in, we can basically wrap that in, URL search params. We can do whatever we want with that. Let's turn this async. Now, I think for now, what we're going to do here is we can just do const title is equal to body.get. I think I do need to wrap that in URL search params. So new URL search params, await text, and then we can do body.get title. So that's the title here. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to redirect to basically to the title, right? So if I now come back here and I do hello and I hit enter, what it's done is it's redirected me to /hello. And I think if I just remove this title, I wonder if it is relative. Let me just double check this. Title, hello, no, okay. So let me do /create /title. So I'm just going to redirect it to create /hello or wherever it is, which of course there isn't a page, and that's just to show you, hey, we can now just add another route. And because this isn't kind of a hard-coded route, this is where we need to add a parameter. And the way you do that is you add a $, and then we can name this whatever. So I'm just going to do title.tsx. So note the $sign there basically means there's that kind of a parameter going on here. And we do the same as we usually do. So we're going to export a default function. So I'm going to call this create. Let's call this title. Let's take all this away. H1 title. And how do you get the parameter? Well, if I just add this here, well, we can get it through our loader. So if we go back to any loader that we have, so let's just take this loader here, and we add the loader into this route. The loader, if you remember, provides a few things: params, request, context. It provides the params here. The parameter is going to be the title, as noted by our directory or file system, and we can just return. In this case, I'm actually just going to return the params here. I don't need to do anything fancy, so I'm going to return the params, which is basically going to return title, an object with title, and the value, whatever this is going to be. In this case, hello. So again, we can just take the data, or from use loader data. There we go. Just make sure that this gets imported. And if you're playing around with TypeScript, of course you can type this. So you can say title string, and that way you can just destructure that. So title, and let's just add in title. There we go. So now, hopefully, here we're going to see hello. This is a subroute of create. The way we got here was from the create route. We typed in something inside here. We hit enter, or we hit submit. It posts it to the create file, which is basically, again, all web fundamentals, all HTML going on here. And then it redirects to this page because I've added a redirect with the title, and we load that. Now, I think that's basically the fundamentals, or most of the building blocks of Remix at this point. Now, there's a lot of kind of intricate things going on here, which is, each thing in itself is actually quite exciting, and then the implications of it is quite big. But one of the things, another thing, for example, one final thing I want to show is if I go back to the root here, and this is one of the cool things, I can basically remove this scripts tag. And again, because we're using the web fundamentals, this scripts is basically what adds React, adds Remix, all the JavaScript on the client side. At this point, again, I'm not doing anything fancy here. So of course, if you're building up a big application, you're going to have JavaScript. But at this point, I don't need any JavaScript on the page. usually you do when you're doing mutations, because you might, instead of just doing the form, if I go to create index, the form, you might have the on click and you had some JavaScript and you prevent the default behavior. You're basically preventing the fundamental behavior of the web, and then you do things which has always made sense to everyone. But basically, instead of doing that, we're using the fundamentals, which means now if I clear this and I look at the network here, the same app is working, right? I can submit, title, and it all works. But the main difference here is we're not actually loading any JavaScript at all. So this here is my extension. You can actually see if I go into the React developer tools, it's not working. It says, hey, there's no React on this page, and that's because there is no React on this page. I've removed the scripts. This is purely HTML, purely CSS, all server-side rendered. So for things like blogs or static sites, this is basically a great tool to have. If you want to then add, a nicer developer experience, add a few things. There's still a few tricks up Remix's sleeve to do that, but of course you can then start adding JavaScript, progressively for progressive enhancement. So I think that's everything I wanted to cover. This is hopefully to cover the building blocks. And as you're looking at this, when I see these things here, it makes a lot of sense to me. I wonder if there's anything else. I think that's everything I wanted to mention now. This all makes sense to me. Definitely a lot more than I've tried other things like Gatsby and Next, and they didn't quite sit right with me. This one definitely does. But it's everyone. It's your own choice, whatever works for you. So I definitely think this is one to look out for, worth giving a go. It will be available soon, and it will be open source soon. So hopefully a lot more people will see it. But yeah, I think I'm gonna call it there. So again, if there's anything specific you want to dive into, let me know. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Have a good day, and I will see you in the next one.